Okay, I just learned that I can only do 10 minutes at a time. So what I was just saying was that if angle 1 is 45 degrees, angle 2 has to be 45 degrees because we decided that they're vertical angles. So that's how vertical angles are congruent. And actually, they are complementary also, these two, not because they're vertical, but because 45 plus 45 is 90. They're not supplementary because they add up to 90, not 180. And they're not a linear pair because they don't form a line. And lastly, angles 1 and 2 here, hopefully it jumps right out at you from the beginning that these are vertical angles. This one and this one. They're not adjacent because they don't share a side. They're not complementary because they're not 90 degrees. But they are supplementary even though there's no numbers on here. Because right here we have a linear pair. Angle 1 and angle 2 are not a linear pair, but angle 1 and the one with the box are. Linear pairs add up to 180 degrees, so angle 1 has to be 90 degrees. And 90 plus 90 is 180, which makes it supplementary. And again, I said they're not a linear pair. So we're going to work on a couple examples. Hopefully it won't take 10 minutes, but we'll see. And before we start, I want to draw an example of each of these at the top or something to remind you what they mean. So pause for a second, write those down, and then unpause so you can check and see if you got them right. Try to do that without using your other notes because see what you've learned so far. So vertical angles. And they are congruent. So hopefully you have something like that written at the top. Linear pairs equal 180 degrees. Complementary angles add up to 90, and sometimes you'll see them as a right angle. And supplementary angles, let's do this, and then that, something like that. They add up to 180 degrees. So we're going to look at a couple of problems. I'm going to show you some strategies for how to go through these problems on your own, and then one of the other stations has the difficult or easy to difficult versions. The first thing that you need to really realize is how you're going to interpret what they say. Right now I have them sorted in the right category, but usually you'll have to decide that on your own. So the way that I do that is I like to use a highlighter. You can even do that on tests and stuff and highlight the important words. So there's vertical angles. Angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles. Well, what do we know about vertical angles? Vertical angles are congruent. So that's going to be helpful. You could simply write, okay, well, if angle 2 is 105 degrees, then the measure of angle 1, that's what that notation says, is 105 degrees as well. And you could just be done. You don't need to do anything else. That's finished. But you may want to draw yourself a picture just to help you see it while you're still learning. You should always try to draw a picture. Because I know, I'm going to call this angle 1 and angle 2, because I see that this is going to be obtuse, I'm going to use the obtuse angles. So that'll be 105, so angle 2 has to be 105, vertical angles. The other one doesn't have any words, so we're going by the picture. They're adjacent and on a line, so that means these have to add up to 180. So you would write an equation, 124 plus x equals 180 degrees. You're probably supposed to put degrees here. I kind of leave that off a lot, which is wrong, but you'll get used to it. Okay, and then you just have to solve that equation. So I'm going to subtract 124 from both sides. So x equals 56 degrees. And if you want to check it, you would plug the x in to the equation, and 124 plus 56 would equal 180. Similarly, you're going to do the next one, which doesn't say the word complementary, but because there's a 90-degree mark in the corner, we know it has to be complementary. So these two angles, complementary means they add up to 90. We would write x plus 68 equals 90 degrees. You could also write 68 plus x equals 90 degrees. It's the same thing. And then we would solve for x. This is just using algebra at this point. So x is 22 degrees. This one is another one where you would probably want to highlight angle P and angle Q are supplementary angles. Supplementary means 180 degrees. If the measure of angle Q and the measure of angle P are supplementary, that means that the angle P plus angle Q has to equal 180 degrees. Then we can just fill in what we know. So we already know angle Q is 64 degrees. So angle P plus 64 equals 180. And most of the time people would change that to x, or some variable, but it's okay if you keep it as angle P. And then solve. X equals 116 degrees. That's finished. Most of the time you're going to see some that are a little bit more confusing like this. So I'm going to kind of walk you through the way that I would look at this, and then you may be able to solve it another way, and that's absolutely fine. The first thing that jumps out to me here are these not linear pairs, this vertical angle pair right here. If these are vertical angles, then angle Y has to be 72 degrees because vertical angles are congruent. All right. And then I look at it and notice right here, we have a linear pair. Linear pairs add up to 180 degrees. So you could do x plus 72 equals 180. Or you could just do 180 minus 72. You don't have to do the whole equation here if you know what to do. So x is 108 degrees. And now we have to find z down here. And there's 2 or 3 ways you could do it. I will show you the one that jumps out at me, but you might see it a different way. I see right here, this blue angle I just made is 90 degrees because the one right next to it is 90 degrees and they have to add up to 180. So as I was saying before, you could set up an equation or you could just do 90 minus 72 is 18 degrees. So z has to be 18 degrees. And these are the simplest version of these kind of problems. Make sure if you need help with those that you pause, go backwards, watch them again. And if you still have questions, just ask and we'll help you with that. And hopefully I have enough time to get through these in a separate video. We'll see. All right. So these are a little bit different because as you can see at the top, these involve using algebra. So instead of just simple equations or simple recall, you're going to use algebra to solve. So again, I have these sorted by category, but when you see these on worksheets, you will have to decide. You may want to start, this is why you have colored pencils, you may want to start using color to see and focus on the right thing. So I'm going to start with the first one. Vertical angles. The reason I know they're vertical is because I read the problem. The measure of angle PQT, so I'm talking about this angle here, and SQR. So that one's this one down here. So you can see we're talking about this angle and this angle. And that little mark I just made means congruent. So I'm putting that there just kind of for myself. I would recommend writing down the angle measure inside the angle. So right now we have 3x plus 47 and 6x minus 25. And what do we know about vertical angles? They are congruent. So we need to set these equal to each other. 3x plus 47 equals 6x minus